Welcome everyone to the 4th Annual Authors and Artists Festival Rewilding. For those of you just joining us, my name is Liz Burton-Crow and I'm your host from Nature Culture. Our sponsors include the New England Grassroots Environment Fund, Mary King, Kathy Crimmins, and Rescue Poetics. The festival is brought to you with help from my video production company, The Nature Imaginarium, Human Error Publishing, and Score.org. Thank you to our sponsors, our colleagues, all our presenters, and to you for being here. So without further ado, I'd like to present our two presenters for this hour, Lauren Baker and Scott Chaskey. Lauren Baker, PhD, has more than 20 years of experience leading cross-sectoral research, policy, and advocacy for sustainable food systems in nonprofit, academic, business, policy, and philanthropic contexts. Lauren is currently Deputy Director at the Global Alliance for the Future of Food, an alliance of philanthropic foundations working to transform global food systems. At the Global Alliance, Lauren's work is focused on the intersections between food systems and health, climate change, agroecology, and true cost accounting. Previously, Lauren led the Toronto Food Policy Council, a citizen advisory group embedded within the City of Toronto's Public Health Division. She was the founding director of Sustain Ontario, the Alliance for Healthy Food and Farming. Lauren has taught in the Global Food Equity Program at the University of Toronto and at Ryerson University. She is the author of Corn Meets Maize, Food Movements and Markets in Mexico, and co-editor of Balancing the Scales, True Cost Accounting for Food and Earth to Tables. Our second presenter is Scott Chaskey, who is a poet, farmer, and educator. For 30 years, he cultivated crops and community at Quail Hill Farm in Amagansett. I'm gonna say that wrong. Amagansett, thank you. One of the original community-supported agriculture CSA projects in the country. He served on the board of the Northeast Organic Farming Association for over a decade and has served as the founding board member for the Center of Whole Communities in Vermont, Sylvester Mandor Education Farm in New York, and the Peter Matheson Center also in New York. He is the author of This Common Ground, Seed Time on the History, Husbandry, Politics, and Promise of Seeds, and Stars Are Sons. His most recent book, Soil and Spirit, was published by Milkweed Editions in 2023. So welcome, Lauren and Scott.
Nice to be here.
Yes, great to be here, Liz. And I think we're going to get started with a video just to ground us and bring us together into this conversation. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll hope everything works properly.
Imagine that I'm taking a soft piece of doe skin and that I'm wiping the tears from your eyes that you may have accumulated from any grief that you're experiencing in your life. Imagine that I'm taking a soft feather and that I'm wiping any dust out of your ears so that you can hear clearly now the words that are going to be spoken that we've come together. And then imagine that I'm giving you a cool drink of water to help clear the lump from your throat, also from some grief that you may be carrying. After that, we would go into the words of greetings and love and thankfulness to all of the things in the natural world, known as the Ohanda Galehudekwa, or the Thanksgiving Address. Whenever Haudenosaunee people gather, they always begin with the Ohanda Galehudekwa, or the Thanksgiving Address. It is an expression of greetings, love, and thankfulness to everything in the natural world that allows us to be human. You're going to hear this first in Ganyekeha, in the Mohawk language, with Ryan DeCare, and I'll guide you through in English. Before speaking about each new element, Ryan will say, and now we bring our minds together as one, and we send our greetings and our thankfulness to each one of the things that you'll see. At the end of each one, he will say, and now our minds are one.
Agwe ko skon te to hui nuni no kwa ni kumra Tanu de tin horatu ne unque sum a yenagreji hunjata. Ci seco rodio da jejin hodorona deri humtum, nena yawa ne skona au dondi ji hunjata. Kadina yotu hagenuka nikumra. A gwego oskan de tawahui nuninukwa nikumra, tanu de tin horatu ne yeti nistan unhunja. Yagori wadoga jitia gotka unhajinako sat stonsera. Negui tiko di yung kwadu hunjoni ne ay jun hege, tanu skona daita wata warye yorukwe nake. Kadina yotu hagenuka nikumra. A gwego oskan de tawahui nuninukwa nikumra, tanu de tin horatu ne kahnikarunyu, chisego yodiri wadoga, ci yonat ne kahtu juhaje, na yawa ne ayun konya tanawa, nun yung konya tatas, tanu namzagarake, wajin hoda wahetka skayo unhunjake. Ona gadi a gwego oskan de tawahui nuninukwa nikumra, tanu de tin horatu ne nya de kanjake awonke tukunditeru, chisego yodino harenyu haje jika nikarunyu, tanu dayonat ka wahaje na audi warum, na yawa ne jun hekwa yung kwatumse. A gwego oskan de tawahui nuninukwa nikumra, tanu de tin horatu ne yotunduni sungoyen towi. Nyateka humtake, nyateka teerake, tanu nyateka kuirake kui wahita wanya heetsane aitawake nona te watunkajaks, tanu yung kijonte nona yung kwanu waktani. Ona gadi a gwego oskan de tawahui nuninukwa nikumra, tanu de tin horatu ne oji nuwa suma. Nyateka ji numake kui wahi sagoteru uhunjake, ne dayodiri hoyenawa guhake, tanu ayodi enrastung hajeke ji uhunjate, na yao ne a gwego skan au dondi. Ona gadi a gwego oskan de tawahui nuninukwa nikumra, tanu de tin horatu ne jun hekwa. Nya deku aze sun a yung kwayon ka hehtaku sun jinua yung kwayon toserum. Negui oni de tin horatu ne asu nikutate goa. Onaste ona usara tanu osa heta. Negadi a gwego oskan de tawahui nuninukwa nikumra, tanu de tin horatu ne wahyanim ta. Nya te wayake kayon hunjake ne aitawake, aitawah nikunyate, tanu dai te wayeste ne jun hekwa. De tin horatu oni ni hundesa. Negui tiko honda de sagutastu ne sunkwaya diso a ganari ne negahi suma. A gwego oskan de tawahui nuninukwa nikumra, tanu de tin horatu ne garharunyo, tanu karuntakwe niyu jiniku karuntoto hunjake. Wahta niyu sanota. Segu te wanya heza na aitawatste, aitawate nu sunyate, aitawata jata darihate no no motorate, tanu jun hekwa yung kwatumse. A gwego oskan de tawahui nuninukwa nikumra, tanu de tin horatu ne uji ton ugum a gundi nagre ju hunjate, tanu ne kwatiko wana akweks niyo sanota. Chisego te yonatka wahajinauti satstonsera. A gwego oskan de tawahui nuninukwa nikumra, tanu de tin horatu ne nyadegariota ke te yonata warye jigar harunyo, chisego ye tikos jiguti nakenojes kar hagumsu, tanu de yonatka wahajinauti warum, tanu audi nehm. A gwego oskan de tawahui nuninukwa nikumra, tanu de tin horatu ne gayeri niyo konrare, o tareke, onjeke, na kumke, tanu nikonke nukwadi ne jona de werinum. Seguro dio tajit no hotarona deri huntu na yawa ne naitawa dumye. A gwego oskan de tawahui nuninukwa nikumra, tanu de tin horatu ne yung kisata sonta nekoni terajes. Jisego jegum sarajes jidum kiswa te dani jini wasundesus na yawa ne skan au dandi jihunjate. A gwego oskan de tawahui nuninukwa nikumra, tanu de chida wanu horatum ne chida wajia onjeke nekagarakwa. Jisego tudini tuhajene rau satstonsera. Ona a gwego oskan de tawahui nuninukwa nikumra, tanu de tin horatu ne yujisto koronyu de yudiswatetum, jitkaro yadajes, jisego yukina tunis jinyo geratu antawa gerade, non yung jata tum. Ona gadi nuwa ya tantawa wani harane, neju nuwa tota de naktara gwani ne sangwaya dezu. Antewe hiara ke zero sa anyo rogodagwa, tanu rowina dama gwego no hota de wanya heza ay jun hege. Negadi a gwego oskan de tawahui nuninukwa nikumra, tanu de chida wanu horado ne sangwaya dezu. Kadi na yotu hagenukwa nikumra. Ona gadi tonyore wa kadari wat kweni ne ke wana karata te unko wana og nina yawa ne gwego sa odira suma o hodi togo se jeniore jidi tin horatus tanu yetin rukha. Ya kui te waga di guhruni toka tenu suge ni korha. Toka tenu suge ni korha. Isu kuin na ne ang kwayo tosru yang se wata sutru ni kan horatum sira. Toka di ona ni ka wana ke tanu ona to tane to.
Now we bring our minds together as one. And we send our greetings and our thankfulness to all of the people who have gathered here, that we've all arrived here safely. To our mother, the earth, provides everything that we need. To all of the waters on the earth. To the fish in the waters, for keeping them clean and for giving us food. To all of the roots and the shrubs and the bushes. To all the hanging fruits. In Haudenosaunee country, we acknowledge Ganiya Hundessa, or the strawberry, as they are the first to ripen in the spring. To our sustenance, the corn, the beans, and the squash. To all of the animals. And to the birds for giving us their beautiful songs. To the trees for shelter and shade. And to the four winds from the four directions. To our grandfathers, the thunders. To the sun, our elder brother. To the moon, our grandmother. And to her helpers, the stars. That Ryan mentions are Haudenosaunee specific. First, there is the teachers who have helped us throughout the ages, the prophets. Sometimes we mention one known as Handsome Lake. Then there's the four beings, or their spirit protectors on the other side of the sky, who are always there looking out for us. And lastly is the one known as the Sungwai Disun, he who has finished our bodies or created our bodies, the creator. And we acknowledge him last for all of the things that he has given to us that exist on the earth, and the strength of nature which exists in all things. Anytime Haudenosaunee people gather, they first say the Ohanda Gliwhidekwan. It's the first matter of business. It's right in the word, Ohanda, before, Gliwhidekwan, the matter that is set down. This can be done at a ceremonial event, a political or governance event, and also at social events. This is a true Haudenosaunee land acknowledgement. This is the Indigenous protocol. It's also meant to be shared. This was shared with me 30 years ago, and I'm sharing it with you, and I'm telling you that this is something that can enhance your meetings, your daily life, no matter what it is that you've come to do with any people. Acknowledge your humanity first, and you can go from there.
Lovely.
Thank you. And let me just try and pause this so we stop the audio. And I'll say more about the context of this project in a few minutes. But Scott, I think I'll pass it over to you to talk about your work and your book.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Rhoda. What a lovely way to begin. Our minds as one.
Mm-hmm.
Really lovely. So I am going to read a poem to begin. And this poem is called A Breath. And this is the first page of my book, Soil and Spirit, Cultivation and Kinship in the Web of Life. A breath. Meadowman, house scholar, from field to chair, I hear the deep choir of the anvil, iron and rust, irony, dust. Then Nordic beat breaks to summer, willows wave, elderberry beads gift the cloud, dog rose shades the shore. In a measure of rage, I know the weightlessness of innocence. At dawn, silken nursery tents spin the field to song. Sea air, violet, Bethany stare, shake the man to make of breath a mortal joy. So that begins the book. Now I'm going to go to the prologue. The title of the prologue is A Golden Fledged Growth, and I am so thankful to the most wonderful Milkweed Editions for publishing this book. They have been just wonderful to deal with, and all throughout the book, and they made a beautiful looking book as well. In the forest of Arden, Shakespeare's Orlando hangs pages of odes on trees, a poetic variation on the signals that trees exchange underground through fungal hyphae and mycorrhizal social networks. Orlando's intention is romantic, that of the woodland plants, though we cannot be certain, less so, if equally ardent. We do know that we share with plants the same need and impulse to communicate, and recently we have been reawakened to our evolutionary friendship with other species and to what Mary Evelyn Tucker calls the ever-expanding dynamic circles of connectivity. Stories are born when people come together in relationship, and stories connect us with other species that share our soils, our air, and our water. The challenges that confront us daily in the 21st century, familial, social, economic, political, environmental, can be overwhelming. And as we encounter what is reported as the greatest challenge humanity has collectively faced, climate disruption, the term Ralph Nader prefers, as do I, it is timely to revisit an ancient theme, an interspecies theme, our kinship with nature. In his wise and playful book, Mesquite, my friend Gary Paul Nabhan, ethnobotanist and Franciscan brother, introduces the Mexican rancher Ivan Aguirre. Part of our role here on this planet is to generate riqueza. How would you best say this in English? Richness, abundance, diversity? We are put here to observe the natural world and learn from its structure and its vigor. Traditionally, in multiple cultures, academies of learning have been sited within a natural structure, a forest grove or arbor. In Ireland's ancient Brehon law, a code of conduct, forest protection was of vital importance. Irish head schools were often situated in fields and hedgerows within a grove of trees. The prolific 20th century Indian writer and respected educator Rabindranath Tagore held classes under a canopy of leaves and branches. Of your two teachers, he advised, you will gain more wisdom from the trees. My education most closely resembles an earthen fabric woven together through decades of daily attention to soil structure, both loam and mycelium, and as a curious traveler exposed to diverse landscapes. I have learned through literature and in friendship with land, my teachers, poets, pine, oak, beech, stone, silt loam, the sharp-shinned hawk, and the windhover. Now I'm skipping to the end of the prologue. Throughout 30 years of farming on the South Fork of Long Island, New York, my travels have led me to return to the rugged Cornish Penwith Peninsula, where I first learned to cultivate plants, to a pueblo in New Mexico, to the southern coast of Maine, to an international gathering of community farming activists in China, and in memory to the west coast of Ireland. The thread that binds the story I have to tell is linked to an aspect of the mythic tale of the golden bough. This golden-fledged growth, a scion of an oak, serves as talisman and key for the journey. Should the traveler be allowed to free a branch from the tree, another golden bough will sprout in its place, and thus another traveler will chance to pluck a living symbol of our symbiotic relationship with fecund, numinous, endangered nature. This book, through stories of people, plants, and place, explores that relationship. The Japanese poet Matsuo Basho, known as nature's pilgrim, saw in the movements of sun and moon across the sky a metaphor for a journey, years coming or going wanderers too. Each day is a journey, and the journey itself home. We ourselves are whirling day by day within circles of connectivity. What you will read in this book is the pulse of the bough when plucked, the pulse of the poems within the wall, the beat of the cormorant's wings in flight just above the sea surface, the salt spray tossing to touch the bird's wings, all part of the miraculous that comes so close, wild in our breast for centuries. So that's from the prologue, and I turn it over to you.
Thanks, Scott. That was so beautiful. And it's really just such a privilege to share this space with you and think about the connections between our work and these concentric circles that you talked about, and how stories of people, plants, and place can create connections, threads of connections. So the Earth to Tables Legacies project is a collective project. It's a collective multimedia project. And the context of the project that we embarked on was really Canada's truth and reconciliation process, as well as the COVID and pandemic process. We had started our collective conversations before COVID, but then during COVID really pivoted to think about how these stories could be part of an online conversation. And this, of course, was something that we were all doing. And we began to document our conversations and record them. And that became both the book and a website, which I'll share with you in a few minutes, videos and photo essays, educational resources as people turned online to have these kinds of conversations in schools and in communities around the world. That's what I'm going to share with you today. There were 13 storytellers that were part of this project and many other collaborators that joined in along the way. And really at the heart of this work is many of the themes that Scott just spoke about. And one of those themes for us was the theme of food sovereignty. So I'm going to start by reading a little bit about this context of food sovereignty that we grounded ourselves in as we began this collective conversation. And I'll just hold up the book, which I think, of course, is really beautiful. You're seeing it backwards here, Earth to Tables Legacies, and then I'll show you the website and take you on a bit of a tour in a few minutes. At the beginning of the book, we identify a number of tensions that we explore through our conversations. And this is about food tensions, corporate food regime versus food sovereignty movement. Our legacies exchange is a response to what we see as a crisis, environmental, political, cultural, and epistemological, represented in the capitalist mode of industrial agriculture and a global food system shaped in the past 60 years by corporate concentration, environmental destruction, dispossession of peasant and indigenous land, distancing between producers and consumers, neoliberal trade policies, and increasing health issues. The focus should not only be on what we are against, but what we're for, said Fulvio Gionetto, one of our Mexican collaborators. Rather than dwell on what we were up against, we chose to focus on more sustainable and healthy food system. The food systems we were trying to recover or create, epitomized by the term food sovereignty. Living food sovereignty, Legacies partners speak from where they stand. The Legacies project started as an exchange among friends, actively creating alternatives to the industrial food system. So our conversations about food sovereignty were grounded in people's everyday lives. Chandra reflected on the concept while breastfeeding her baby. The first time I heard the term food sovereignty, it took me a while to wrap my head around that phrase, but the work I do is food sovereignty. It's just that, it's just living that food sovereignty. And you heard Chandra in the opening video leading the Thanksgiving address with Ryan DeCare. We asked each of the collaborators to define food sovereignty in their own words, related to their cultural context and food work. For example, Diane, who epitomizes the earth end of our Earth to Tables metaphor, focuses on the work of growing food. Food sovereignty to me means that we have the ability to produce locally most of what we need to eat, to provide the population with good, nutritious, culturally appropriate foods. It's a human right to have food and water. Chandra, representing the table in our conceptual framework, emphasizes the eating end of the process. Food sovereignty is being in control of what's on the end of your fork. That includes knowledge about and access to what it is that should be on the end of your fork. It includes support while in recovery from food-related trauma and trauma that is being played out through food. Likewise, the response of our Mexican partners depended on their identities and contexts. So Mayan food activists brought their particular indigenous perspective to the conversation. In fact, Valiana noted, the word sovereignty doesn't exist in our Mayan language, so we focus on janal, or eating, the broader act of recovering our traditional ancestral knowledge. It's about weaving ourselves into a community, inhabiting the land in its living forms as the woods, the winds, the ocean, the fire around which we come together to eat as a celebration of life. So let's take a tour of the website, and I want to introduce you. I think you can see that now. So this is the home page of our website, and I want to introduce you to the storytellers and the collaborators I mentioned. Here's the group that forged relationships over the last 5 to 10 years, whose stories are reflected in the photo essays and in videos. And if you scroll down to the bottom of our website, and I can put the link in the chat, of course, later, you'll see a list of all the videos that have been produced through this work. And then you can go to the soil, go to one of the videos. And so I'll just share this, a few minutes of this video as a way to kind of connect to this theme that we're exploring of living soil connection to the earth.
The summer of 2016, which was too dry, and the summer of 2017, which is too wet. I think the fact that the soil got too dry in a drought, too wet in a rainy season, indicates that we've destroyed soil tilth, and I think it's because of overcultivation. The result of overcultivation is that the fungal content of the soil is basically ripped apart, and we have to do something about it. I have to transform the way I farm if I want to be sustainable.
We need to take care of these little microscopic guys that we don't see, but they are there. If you grab one hand of soil, of fertile soil in your hand, you can find more than 7,000 million microorganisms just on that sample. The same amount of human beings that are in the whole earth, just in one handful of soil, of fertile soil. So it's very, very important if we see the soil that way, right? Like a living thing.
Fernando, who worked with me on the farm 15 years ago, and then Fernando came to Ontario to be part of this Legacies project. We started talking and it was like there had been no disconnect. We were both thinking the same things. We don't understand soil microorganisms. There are so many of these creatures and we don't see them. Because we don't see them, we don't pay enough attention. We know in forest soils, especially the work of Suzanne Simard in the BC rainforest, the fungus is the internet of the soil. The fungus carries nutrients, it carries chemicals, it carries information between plants. The indigenous peoples must have had practices that maintained healthy soil because they produced good crops for generation after generation after generation. Obviously not harsh tillage with steel in the field the way we go at it. I'm pretty sure some peasant farmers somewhere in the earth have figured all this out. Or they just never stopped doing what they used to do and they've maintained the fungal content of their soils. I think it will usher in a change in agriculture similar to the organic movement of the 70s and early 80s. I think there'll be a huge shift. People all of a sudden are thinking, we have to change. It has to come or we won't survive. We won't have food.
Look, I just want to introduce you to the other resources. So in each of the stories that we have, either a photo essay, like I mentioned, or a video. And then we have these resources that you can use to kind of dig into the conversation. And these are being used in educational and community settings around the world, and we're really excited about this. And so here is digging in. So we've got different questions that can provide the basis for conversations, decoding questions, specific questions, hands-on activities, intergenerational and intercultural dialogue, expressing sort of this conversation that we've had between the collaborators and amongst ourselves. And then other short videos. In the website, each of these resources has educational resources and ways to dig deeper into the conversation. Each has a continuing the conversation part where we've asked one of our collaborators to react to the video and to the material and sort of add from their own perspective, as well as additional resources and videos and articles so that you can really enter into a deeper conversation about these issues. So we've talked about food sovereignty and we talked about soil, the soil being alive from different perspectives. In Canada, Diane speaking about her farm and needing to farm differently in the current context, thinking differently, and also Scott exploring through her farming in the same way you talked about in your poetry and in your book, the mycelial connections in the soil, really recreating those through her farming practices. Fernando in Mexico in an urban farming context, thinking about all the microbial activity that exists in soil and thinking and exploring our connection through the food we eat to those communities underground. And then Rick, who is a Haudenosaunee collaborator, thinking historically about our relationship to soil and that connection to the creation story. And so now I'd like to bring us to an urban farming context in Toronto. where we're exploring issues of food justice. And I have another excerpt from the book that I'll quickly read before I turn it back to you, Scott. People are taking urban agriculture seriously. Urban ag is making a difference in our local food system. It's actually producing food. When I tell people that we grow more than 20,000 pounds of vegetables on this site, they're shocked, because I don't think people assume we'd actually be able to grow that much food. And this photo essay is a conversation between myself and Leticia Deawuo, who was the executive director of the Black Creek Community Farm and is now the executive director of an organization called Seed Change. She continues, I don't think people value urban farms in the same way they value other farms. So having the farm has made a huge difference in urban agriculture across the city. There are more farms popping up now. There is more interest from different groups around the world interested in the Black Creek Community Farm. They're interested in the model and want to create something like it within their own communities. I think the Black Creek Farm can be a lead organization in showing the different levels of impact that urban agriculture can have. From growing food to improving mental health, there are many different social issues that urban agriculture can tackle. But we need to do a better job at looking at that evidence base and sharing that evidence with funders and different stakeholders within this work. The farm is like an anchor for community transformation. It is addressing food security issues by supporting people to garden all across Jane Finch. But it also raises the level of conversation about food justice and food sovereignty in this neighborhood. And this is a farm in a neighborhood, in a really important neighborhood in Toronto that faces many social justice challenges related to access to healthy food and access to green space. And it's become a vibrant hub where people can explore community, connect to each other, and rediscover their relationship to the land and to soil. So I'll pause there and hand it back to Scott.
Oh, thank you. That was so lovely. There were so many things that came to mind. I was, I'd mark something to read, and I'm changing it because of what you were speaking about. Because when you mentioned the word peasant, you'll hear why I'm reading this section. But first, I wanted to read from the notes at the back of my book that have to do with this amazing conference that I went to in China some years ago, and it was there's an organization called Urgency based in France that every couple of years puts on a gathering of people practicing community-supported agriculture from all over the world. In China, there were people from 40 different countries. And when I was involved in the beginning of the CSA movement in this country, no one had an idea that there would be an international conference in China, of all places. And no one had an idea that there would be 7,000 or 8,000 CSAs in this country as well. Anyhow, so this topic of food sovereignty, I'm going to read you a definition from Via Campesina, which is an international peasant movement. Food sovereignty is the right of people to healthy and culturally appropriate food produced through ecologically sound and sustainable methods, and their right to define their own food and agricultural systems. It puts those who produce, distribute, and consume food at the heart of food systems and policies rather than the demands of markets and corporations. It defends the interests and inclusion of the next generation. It offers a strategy to resist and dismantle the current corporate trade and food regime, and directions for food, farming, pastoral, and fisheries systems determined by local producers. Food sovereignty prioritizes local and national economies and markets and empowers peasant and family farmer-driven agriculture, artisanal fishing, pastoralist-led grazing, and food production, distribution, and consumption based on environmental, social, and economic sustainability. So now I'm going to read from this chapter on China because this was so fascinating that this came up there. The idea of peasant, pastoral and peasants. Throughout conversations and in the papers presented at the conference, the word peasant was in constant use, often in the context of the interaction between urban dwellers and rural peasants. The usage of the word was descriptive, not derogatory, as it often is in the United States. In fact, one speaker, a Chinese academician, urged the attendees, there were 1,000 people from all over China and from 40 different countries, not to forget the peasants of China. He was passionate when he claimed that, after all, Chinese peasants have changed Chinese history and that cities are really places for peasants to gather. When I was asked by Urgency's director to collaborate on a closing pledge for the conference, a number of us from various countries debated, for the sake of accuracy, which English word to select, peasant or farmer. For many countries, peasant is the logical and appropriate choice. The word defines a historical reality, a social compact born out of land use practices, and ultimately the land. Through Via Campesina, an international peasant movement whose principal objective is to develop solidarity within the diversity of small farmer organizations, key issues were on the table in China: agroecology as the cornerstone of food sovereignty, and the rights of peasants at work in rural areas, a resolution proposed by the United Nations Human Rights Council. Elizabeth Henderson, a social activist who farmed in upstate New York for many years, learned at this conference that the French Federation of Peasants had been working for years to resurrect the meaning of this resonant word. The sister to CSA is known in France as AMAP, the Association for the Maintenance of Peasant Agriculture. The name is not only honorific, but pragmatic and descriptive. My Oxford English Dictionary defines a peasant as a countryman, a rustic, a worker on the land, whereas my Random House American English Dictionary offers this: one of a class of persons of inferior social rank, a rude, unsophisticated, usually uneducated person of little financial means. Not exactly encouragement to youth or to one unlucky enough to be raised in the country. In China, as in other nations, the word peasant does not necessarily describe a heathen or a second-class citizen. In an address to the conference, Professor Wen Tijun observed that in the course of building its identity, rural Chinese civilization must stand on this principle. We must follow a path that starts from the bottom and that stresses deep mobilization of the grassroots people. Ultimately, what matters in my mind is the attitude of a people in relation to the land. Considering questions of identity, ethics, and stewardship, ecologist and indigenous rights leader Dennis Martinez rejects the common Western term management in favor of what workers on the land prefer: land care or land giving. He uses the term indigeneity, inclusive of peasants and pastoralists, when discussing the 650 million or more people worldwide who may be considered indigenous. So your part of this program led me to that. I hope I didn't go too far there, but that happens to be one of the journeys that makes up my book, and just that idea of using that word and how different, what different resonance it has for different people, and even represented in dictionaries of all places. Anyhow, that's what I have for now, and I'll read a little bit more later.
I love that contrast, those contrasting definitions of the word peasant, and I'm familiar with Urgency's work. Just last week, I was at at the Committee on World Food Security meeting, which is an annual meeting in Rome, where states gather and other people gather to think about food systems and food security. and was on a panel with a young farmer from the US, from Kentucky, who is reclaiming the word peasant in the US context. So this is in the spirit of agroecology movements globally, food sovereignty movements, working with La Via Campesina, which is, as you said, the largest peasant movement and largest global social movement in the world. And so it's really exciting to see, you know, also young people, young farmers thinking about reclaiming that word and connecting differently to farming. And we know we're losing farmers. So it's really hopeful to have a new generation of farmers that are connected globally through this kind of agroecology and food sovereignty movements. But I will, before we open it up, because we'd love to hear if there are any kind of comments and questions, I'll read this piece from Robin Wall Kimmerer, because I think it also connects to how we've framed up this conversation today. And so she writes at the beginning of our book, reflecting on the process that we've outlined, the kind of collective exploration of these issues that we embarked on to explore food sovereignty, to explore food justice, to think about agroecology in different contexts across the Americas. She writes, a bowl of soup may seem like a simple thing, but it steams at the center of a whole web of relationships that are celebrated in these pages. Food is the connecting place for the material strands of our lives, nutrition, health, economics, ecology, as well as the intangible emotional and spiritual nourishment it provides. Food links us intimately to our families, to our culture, our history, our language, to the plants, the animals. Indeed, food is one of our primary connections to Chaskey, our Mother Earth, who provides us with all that we need to live, with good food, with medicines, with teachers, with beauty. What are termed natural resources or food commodities in Western society are understood here in a traditional sense as gifts. The gifts from Mother Earth. Every time we fill our plates, we are beneficiaries of the gifts of the earth. And the choices we make have consequences that connect to every thread in the web of food relationships. And as humans, we know how to respond to gifts. We say thank you, and then we are called to reciprocity, to give back our gifts in return. This reciprocity can take the form of restoration, of bringing back the soil, the seeds, the knowledge, and the ethics, as well as by restoring right relationship between land and peoples. The presence of those plural tables conjures up the image of the great dish with one spoon, a teaching shared here by collaborator Rick Hill. And there's a lovely photo essay and slideshow that Rick prepared on the dish with one spoon as part of this book and part of the website. This symbol of the earth feeding us all from the same bowl is the foundation of ancient treaty agreements, including a treaty between my Haudenosaunee neighbors and my Anishinaabe ancestors, writes Robin Wall Kimmerer, wherein the people acknowledge that the gifts of the earth are to be shared. There is only one dish and only one spoon, the same size for everyone. It is a statement about making justice. It also recognizes, like every bowl, it is finite. When it's empty, it's empty. The people agree to keep that bowl full, to share its gifts, to keep it clean. This also embodies an even larger agreement, not only among people, but between people and the earth. An agreement that as the earth cares for us, we will care for her in the covenant of reciprocity. I hold my bowl of soup in gratitude and think of the haunting last lines of Harja's powerful poem. At this table, we sing with joy. This is Joy Hargrove. At this table, we sing with joy, with sorrow. We pray of suffering and remorse. We give thanks. Perhaps the world will end at the kitchen table while we are laughing and crying, eating of the last sweet bite. My hope is that the teachings shared in this collection will be a dose of mishkin that helps to keep the dish full, the spoon shared, and the world whole and green. And I think this speaks to the spirit of the project that we undertook through Earth to Tables Legacies, which really at its foundation was about gratitude for each other, the relationships, the diversity in the world, the diversity in the human and natural world. It's for, as a personal project, it was just, such a joy to be part of these conversations, to go deeper with these friends and collaborators, and to explore these themes visually and through an arts-based multimedia kind of form, which allowed us to think really expansively about these issues. So I'll end there.
That's lovely. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you both. So we're going to have about 10 minutes available if people do have questions or comments. You can either raise your hand or you can type your question or comment into the Q&A panel. In the meantime, since I don't see anything there already, I did have one sort of thought bubble up while you two were talking and almost dialoguing in a way, even though you approach it from different areas of expertise. But I was kind of thinking about this idea of living soil. And recently I've done some research on people doing like decomposition in terms of their end of life planning, where there's a company near where I live called Recompose, where you kind of go into like a pod basically, and it's kind of like composting, and they add straw and things and rotate you, and then after so much time you're returned as soil to your family, and then people who aren't claimed will go out and they'll help build some land in some sort of natural wildlife refuge. I was curious if either one of you was familiar with that kind of thing, and then if you are, what are your sort of thoughts about end of life reliving through soil?
Oh my gosh. Fascinating that this would come up, because I have not heard of that at all, but fascinating that this would come up, because just last evening we scattered the ashes of my mother-in-law, who was a wonderful painter who died at age 98, and we've been spending months dealing with the house and the stuff, and 60 years of her art, and 60 years of her husband's art. And last night we went out after we'd cleared everything, and we're right on the water. She had done these paintings, one of her famous series called Sammy's Beach, and so we went to Sammy's Beach, and it was a clear night, sparkling stars everywhere, the Pleiades just coming up right here, and we four of us, family members, took the ashes and scattered them on the edge of the water as the tide was coming in. It was such a beautiful moment. Talk about reciprocity between humans and nature. So I'm sorry to go off on a tangent, but it was quite amazing for you to talk about that. The thing I do want to say about soil, we could, if we have another couple hours, we could keep talking about it, but is that, the major statement that any farmer makes is that the job of the farmer is to leave the soil in an improved condition than when he or she started. It's all about building soil, and such a pleasure to have the opportunity in life to actually steward a piece of land, wherever that is, and to realize what that means, what that compact between a human and actual soil is, and it's an endless discovery to learn what it is to build soil. Fascinating thing to be part of. So anyhow, those are my few comments.
I think it's such an interesting connection that you're making. And actually, there's just a festival this weekend at a community center that we've been part of here in Toronto called the Brickworks, the Evergreen Brickworks, on natural burial and death. And I think that this is the sort of, when we talk about the life cycle, right? And, Scott, you just referenced your mother and this sort of like the cycle that you have gone through with her in terms of mourning and celebrating and preparing and connecting to her memory and who your mother and father were in the world. We have ruptured that connection by not returning ourselves or not acknowledging that essential connection that we have to the soil, to the earth, that biological, ecological connection. And I think this is really, what we're exploring. We're exploring how to recenter those relationships in our life, and through soil is like a beautiful way of thinking about that, and really understanding that from death comes life and rebirth. So I appreciate that you talking about you referencing this. And in the Legacies project, one of the really beautiful parts of it was this intergenerational conversation that we held through the years. So we have, Deborah Barnt, my co-editor, who's in her 70s, and a number of collaborators like Diane, who talks about soil in one of the videos and represents the kind of earth part of Earth to Tables. Our elders. Rick Hill as an elder in our community, and in conversation with the younger people, younger collaborators, really thinking about what it means to be young and to grow old, and to have conversations about that in ways that we don't have opportunities to have conversations about that in the way that we've structured our relationships and our society mostly. So yeah, I just want to, think about how we're connected to our ancestors. Like, part of what we were doing was exploring those connections to our ancestors through soil, through food, through our memories and our cultural experience and connections. All of that's so centrally important. So I appreciate that connection. And then Scott, thinking about your evening last night, connecting, to the universe through the scattering of the ashes.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you both for your insights, and Scott for sharing such a personal moment, because it really is, something that we all do share at some point, with loved ones. And so your vulnerability with sharing that is really appreciated. And I may have asked a question that went too deep, pun intended, because I don't see any more in the Q&A, but we have just a couple minutes left. So I wanted to give you guys the opportunity to plug your books. Where can people buy them if they're interested?
Maybe I'll read the very last passage. Can I do that? Actually, here's the book. Looks like that. And it has drawings by my son, my youngest son. The trees are very much a part of this book, and so there are drawings of a redwood and a baobab tree and various trees throughout the book. Anyhow, this is from the epilogue. In the center of the herb plantings, a golden garden spider, also known as the writing spider, has built a web among the lively branching Forsythia suspensa after the delicate yellow flowers fell to earth. I wonder at the resilience of the spider's delicate thread that vibrates with the wind and flashes in the sunlight between seen and unseen, a thread almost without weight, spun out from a nearly weightless orb-weaving arachnid, yet strong enough to span the distance between Forsythia branch and oak stake. This thin substance pulses with the basic energy of the universe, an energy fragile when displaced, though intricate in evolution and architecture, like words, made to ride changes in weather. For the indigenous people of this land, language, words, exist as primal creative powers behind all things manifest, behind the spider, the forsythia branch, the light that plays on the gossamer thread. We are invited to listen, to receive the music, to make it new, and to harmonize. No word exists alone. Here in the garden, language is alive within the web of ocean mist, fluent wind, and pollinators returning to brush the flowers of May. And my choice again is obvious. I grip the ash handle to turn silt and clay, and daylight fills the furrows. Under the soil, under the eternal flux, the rhizome endures.
Thank you so much, Scott. That's such a beautiful way to end this hour and our time together. And I'll just add that you can find Earth to Tables Legacies, Multimedia Food Conversations Across Generations and Cultures by Deborah Barnt, myself, and Alexandra Gellis, at your favorite independent bookstore. And it was published by Roman and Littlefield, who were really incredible to work with and patient as we developed this sort of multimedia project, or online and in book with links and resources. And I just want to emphasize how wonderful it was to work with them, along with all the collaborators.
Two good stories of working with publishers.
Yeah, totally.
Be better.
Thank you both. I really appreciate an important conversation. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it.